I always figured my rights didn't change just because I crossed a state line, but damn, this new DOJ deal flipped that on its head. If you're in the wrong state, you're not getting your gear back, and you're not getting the same protection as everyone else. What's up, everyone? This is Ted from Line 45. And today, I'm breaking down how the feds just created a two-tier Second Amendment, and why your zip code now decides whether you're treated like a citizen or a criminal. Before I start, I would really appreciate it if you would push those buttons below. The subscribe button, the notification bell, all of them. This is not necessary, but those little clicks help a brother out. Plus, it pushes me to give you more valuable gun-related content on your screen. Now, buckle up, and let's get back to the video. I've been watching this forced reset trigger mess unfold for a while, and when the DOJ's settlement finally dropped, folks thought it was a clean win. Spoiler, it wasn't. What the Department of Justice did was quietly settle with rare breed triggers and a couple of other parties over the ATF's forced reset trigger classification. That classification claimed FRTs were machine guns under the NFA, and they sent letters and agents out like it was gospel. But instead of a full reversal or a court ruling, this was a behind-the-scenes handshake, and unless you're in the right state, you're still screwed. The DOJ agreed to stop enforcing its machine gun classification of FRTs, but only against certain plaintiffs and only in specific states. They also said they'd return confiscated items, but not to everyone. If you live in one of the 16 states that actually stood up and challenged the ATF's actions, you get nothing. No returned property, no protection from prosecution. It's like the DOJ told the quiet states, "Play nice and we'll cut you in," while punishing the ones that fought back. This wasn't a legal correction. It wasn't some new ruling grounded in the Constitution. It was a bureaucratic workaround that fixed the politics, not the law. And if you're sitting in a pro-2 ampere state thinking your fight earned you something, the feds just used this deal to remind you who's really in charge. The worst part? This just sets up a system where your rights end at your state border. I've always believed that the Bill of Rights applied to every American, no matter which patch of dirt they lived on. But this settlement? It made damn sure that isn't how things work anymore. What the DOJ just pulled off wasn't just selective enforcement. It was a quiet admission that your Second Amendment rights come with a zip code filter now. If you live in a state like Texas, Florida, or Missouri, or in states that actually challenged the ATF's FRT ban, you'd think your stand would earn you some protection. Instead, you're the one getting left behind. Meanwhile, folks in states that didn't lift a finger are having their confiscated triggers returned and their cases dropped. It's backward. The ones who fought the overreach are now the ones stuck under it. That's not how rights are supposed to work. These are supposed to be federal laws, not some cafeteria plan where Washington picks and chooses who gets enforcement and who gets a pass. The Second Amendment isn't a state-specific suggestion. It's a constitutional guarantee, and when the federal government starts carving it up based on politics, we're no longer talking about law, we're talking about privilege. That's what this settlement did. It told gun owners, loud and clear, that the rules aren't consistent. That geography matters more than principle. And if this kind of carve-out becomes the playbook, we're all going to be living under different versions of the Second Amendment. Now think about how they pulled this off without even stepping into a courtroom. You know what makes this whole thing worse? The DOJ didn't even take this through a courtroom. No judge. No ruling. No official decision that sets precedent and protects people going forward. They just folded the whole mess into a quiet settlement. That means the rest of us, gun owners who didn't get named in the deal, are left guessing what the rules actually are. That should piss you off. Why? Because we've all seen how fast the ATF can flip a definition on its head. Bump stocks, pistol braces, forced reset triggers. It's a revolving door of reclassifications. When you don't get a solid court ruling, you don't get clarity. You get confusion, and confusion is where they get you. That's where enforcement lives. That's where law-abiding folks end up on the wrong side of a felony charge for owning something that was legal a week ago. This deal let the DOJ avoid the one thing that could have helped all of us: legal precedent. If a court had ruled that forced reset triggers aren't machine guns under federal law, that ruling would apply nationwide. But now, nothing's settled. They tossed out some bones, patched things up with a few plaintiffs, and dodged a courtroom loss that might have tied their hands. This wasn't just a sneaky win for the DOJ. It was a strategic dodge. And that silence is dangerous, because now they know they can do it again. And once you realize how they pulled that off, you start seeing how this playbook could get used anywhere, anytime. You give these agencies an inch with a deal like this, and they'll turn it into a mile. That's how this stuff works. This wasn't just about forced reset triggers. It was a trial run, a test to see if the feds could get away with skirting the courts, dodging headlines, and breaking the Second Amendment up into friendly and unfriendly zones. And now that they pulled it off once, you better believe it won't be the last time. If they can pull this stunt with FRTs, what's stopping them from doing it with binary triggers next, or solvent traps, or heck, even homemade parts? All it takes is a reclassification letter, a few seizures, and a cozy little settlement in a few cherry-picked states. No legal argument, just a quiet deal that tells half the country to shut up and the other half to enjoy the scraps. Think about it. If you're a vendor or manufacturer, how do you even operate in this kind of patchwork? Do you need one product line for California and another for Florida? And if you're a regular gun owner, how do you know what's legal and what's going to get you raided? That confusion isn't by accident. It's the feature, not the flaw. It gives the ATF room to move the goalposts, and it makes sure no one ever feels safe. This deal didn't just screw over folks who own FRTs. It taught the government a new way to control gun rights without ever changing the law. And when they come for the next piece of gear, this blueprint will already be sitting on someone's desk. This whole thing guts one of the core ideas behind federal law, that it's supposed to apply the same way everywhere. Doesn't matter if you're in Wyoming or Connecticut, federal law is federal law. That's the whole point. But now, with this DOJ deal, that idea's taken a hit. Because for the first time I can remember, the federal government just told gun owners, your rights depend on what your state did in court. That's not how this is supposed to work. We're not talking about states with their own gun laws. Every state does its own thing, and that's a whole separate fight. This was a federal enforcement decision. The DOJ and ATF made a call on how to treat FRTs under national law, and then turned around and enforced it differently depending on which state you're standing in. That's a line we can't afford to cross. Because if they can do that here, what's next? Do they start enforcing the NFA differently by region? What about import bans, parts kits, or ammo regulations? You can't call something a constitutional right if it only holds up in certain states. That's not a right anymore. That's just a suggestion that gets watered down by politics. People fought and died for these rights to apply equally to every American. And now the DOJ's treating them like a bargaining chip. This deal might have looked small, but it cracked the foundation. And what they offered in return wasn't even close to justice. It was a consolation prize wrapped in red tape. When you've had something taken from you, especially a right, you don't want half of it handed back with a smile like they did you a favor. That's what this DOJ deal feels like. It's not a correction. It's not justice. It's a carefully staged retreat, where the government gives back just enough to quiet the noise while keeping control over the rest. It's managed surrender, dressed up like reform. They handed gear back to some owners. Not all. They dropped charges for a few, but not for others who were hit with the same enforcement under the same rule. That's not fairness. That's cherry-picking who gets to have their rights acknowledged. And it sends a message: play nice, stay quiet, and maybe we'll cut you a deal. Raise hell or take us to court. Too bad. The Second Amendment isn't a bargaining chip. You don't earn it by behaving the way the DOJ wants you to. You have it because you're an American. Because the Constitution doesn't hand out rights by committee, vote, or agency discretion. The deal's defenders keep calling this a step forward. But you don't move forward by leaving a bunch of good people behind. That's not a win. That's a fractured retreat that left the door open for more selective enforcement down the road. You want to restore gun rights? You do it across the board, not with carve-outs and backroom settlements. That's why the fight doesn't end here, and why we can't let this become the new normal. I don't say this lightly. If we let this deal slide without calling it what it is, we're asking for more of the same. This wasn't some routine administrative fix. It was a test to see if we'll settle for partial victories, unequal rights, and backroom compromises dressed up as solutions. And if we sit on our hands, they'll keep running this play over and over, carving out rights until they're just empty paperwork. So what do? For starters, stop accepting scraps. When agencies like the DOJ or ATF roll back their own overreach, that's not a gift, it's damage control. Make that loud and clear in comment periods. through your representatives, in every gun forum, and at every range meetup. You have a right to full and equal protection under the law, not just when your state's on good terms with Washington. Support the lawsuits that don't settle, the ones that fight for clear court rulings, not quiet deals. Stand with the folks still waiting for their property to be returned and their charges to be cleared. Because if they lose, we all lose, whether you own a forced reset trigger or not. And stay sharp, because this isn't about one accessory. It's about the precedent. They've figured out how to fracture gun rights without passing a single law, and it'll keep happening unless we show them it doesn't work. This is still our fight, and it ain't over until rights mean the same thing in every state, for every American.